Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, co-host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is January the 31st, 2024. It's been 10 years and 4 days since Russia's illegal occupation of Crimea on January 27, 2014, and 1 year and 341 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression against Ukraine. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There are map updates today, and the link is in the podcast description. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Ukrainian General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian male bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Let's start with the daily assessment, which has been updated. 1. Unseasonably warm weather forecasted for later in the week will impact tractability for both combatants as the saturated surface soil thaw. 2. In our assessment, it is almost certain the United States has ended financial and military aid to Ukraine, unless there is an unforeseen event that changes congressional leadership. 3. The actions of Congress are damaging the US global standing as a trusted ally of democratic states and have partially contributed to increased kinetic and hybrid warfare activity executed by Russia and its so-called axis of resistance of Belarus, North Korea, Iran and their proxies. 4. The armed forces of Ukraine are facing critical ammunition shortages, particularly air defense missiles and artillery rounds, that are directly impacting the ability to continue active defense operations along the entire line of conflict. 5. We assess that Ukraine's decision to build a 1,000-kilometer-long static echelon defense is strategically sound. 6. Russian forces have established an operational objective to capture Chasiv Yar west of Bakhmut. 7. Russian commanders have put mission objectives over all other considerations and are committed to capturing the Avdiivka salient regardless of the cost. 8. We maintain that combat that closely resembles World War I trench warfare versus 21st century combined arms maneuver warfare will continue through meteorological winter, which ends on February the 29th. 9. We maintain that Russia's ongoing political purge is accelerating, and the Putin regime is accelerating its transition into a fascist state and further assess that in the medium and long term the shift will endanger global security and stability. 10. While the possibility of an intentional nuclear accident caused by Russian occupiers at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant remains low, the threat should be taken seriously. We begin in Kharkiv Oblast, in the Kupiansk area of operation, or AO. Mutual fighting continued in the area of Sinkivka, with no change in the situation. Russian mercenary male blogger War Gonzo walked back earlier Russian claims, stating Ukrainian forces pushed Russian troops from Tabaivka. Over the past 24 hours, Kharkiv has been attacked by 12 Shahed 136 one-way drones in 2 waves, striking civilian housing and infrastructure and a small electrical substation at a factory. Kharkiv Mayor Igor Terehov reported 3 people were wounded, and a 4th person was injured in a village near the city due to a separate attack. In the Kremennaio of Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance on Terny, and mutual fighting was reported east of Yampolivka. Male blogger War Gonzo reported that Russian forces had reached Terny, and a Ukrainian video proved he was technically correct. A Russian soldier claimed that he woke up to discover his unit had withdrawn under the cover of darkness and left him behind. So he walked to the Ukrainian positions east of the village and surrendered. We did not adjust the map, but can verify a Russian advance of an army of 1 that ended in failure. Southwest of Kreminna, the Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armored, made its traditional report of fighting in the area of Dubrova. Next, let's talk about the Donbas. In northeastern Donetsk Oblast, in the Bakhmut AO, fighting was limited. Russian forces continued their attempts to advance into Bogdanivka, and fighting continued in the area of Ivanivske, with no change in the situation. In the Klishchiivka AO, positional fighting continued north of Klishchiivka. In southwestern Donetsk, Russian forces maintained their attacks in the Avdiivka AO, as Ukrainian defensive lines stabilized again. On the northern flank, fighting continued southeast of Novobakhmutivka and east of Stepove, with no change in the situation. On the southern flank, Ukrainian forces reportedly conducted active defense operations on the southern edge of Avdiivka, preventing Russian troops from advancing to Soborna Street. To the southwest, Russian troops continued their attempts to advance from the eastern edge of Pervomaiske and east of Nevelske without success. In the Marinka AO, just like yesterday, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance on Georgievka and from the southern edge of Marinka in the direction of Pobeda, with no change in the situation. In the Vuhledar AO, Russian forces continued to attack Novomykhailivka from the northeast, east and south without success. Further south, an attempted Russian advance from Solotke in the direction of Vodyane was repulsed. 12 armored vehicles were involved, with Ukrainian forces destroying 2 main battle tanks, 6 armored personnel carriers, and 1 infantry fighting vehicle. After suffering heavy losses, the surviving Russian forces retreated. The attack left 1 company combat destroyed and the second combat ineffective. The fighting was further west than where we had previously assessed, and based on the new intelligence, we adjusted the map. In the Kherson AO, fighting continued in Krynki and the forests to the south, with Ukrainian forces repelling 13 attacks. Ukrainian forces were able to consolidate their positions after pushing into the forest south of the center of the village. Based on the new intelligence, we updated the map. The Russian 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, which was one of Moscow's most elite units 2 years ago, shared pictures of their Cold War-era T-55 medium-duty tanks operating near the village. Here is my theater-wide update. On January the 30th and the 31st, air defenses intercepted 14 of 20 Shahed-136 one-way drones launched at Ukraine. The 6 drones that were not intercepted were accounted for striking Kharkiv. Multiple reports continued that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky plans to dismiss the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel General Valery Zaluzhny. It is well known that the pair have clashed in the past, but it remains to be seen if a change in command will be made. The Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine approved and submitted to the Verkhovna Rada the 3rd draft of mobilization laws. The main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GUR, reported that hackers knocked the Russian Ministry of Defense Special Communications Service offline. The defense network is used to support secure internal communications between Russian units. The United States news agency Politico reported that the ground-launched small-diameter bombs, or GLSDB, had passed acceptance testing with the Pentagon and are ready to be transferred to Ukraine. Launched from HIMARS and the M270 multiple launch rocket system, the munitions were designed specifically for Ukraine by taking surplus M26 rocket assemblies and GBU-39 250-pound, that's 113 kilograms, bombs and engineering foldable wings. The rocket brings the bomb assembly to altitude and then separates. The wings open and the bomb glides to its target up to 150 kilometers from the launch point. The money for the project was allocated in the 2023 fiscal year, although there are no funds to sustain future production. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken once again appealed for Congress to end gridlock, saying, quote, "We've now run out of aid to Ukraine, and we're even seeing some evidence of what that means on the battlefield. Approval of support for Ukraine in the near term is vital." Unquote. President of France Emmanuel Macron has joined a growing list of European leaders saying the quiet part aloud. Europe needs to consider a future without US support. Quote, "First, we will have to be ready to act, defend and support Ukraine whatever happens and whatever the US decision will be. I'd say we are lucky to have such a partner, such an ally, but very clearly we have to be lucid to the fact that Ukraine is part of the European continent. And whatever the US decides, we have to make the right and bold decision to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And we have to follow the line of the current strategy, which is it is impossible for us to see Russia winning this war. What is the future of our eastern flank? What is the future of the whole of Europe? What is the future of Caucasus? What is the future of Central Asia?" Unquote. Macron went on to say that France and the European Union need to make a series of immediate decisions to ensure there is a secure future. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg plans to meet with US congressional representatives to discuss continued support for Ukraine and the future of the NATO alliance. Quote, "It will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians if President Putin wins, but it will also make the world more dangerous and jeopardize security around the globe. It will embolden other authoritarian leaders, not only Putin's Russia, but also North Korea, Iran and China, to use force. Today it is Ukraine, tomorrow it could be Taiwan." Unquote. Stoltenberg warned that Ukraine's achievements on the battlefield are being underestimated, and there is only one way to end Russia's war of aggression. Quote, "If we want an end to this war, the only way to do so is to convince Putin he will not win on the battlefield. And the only way to achieve that is to provide weapons to Ukraine from the United States and from other allies and partners." Unquote. There was no reported progress in the US Congress on immigration reform, border security or military aid for Ukraine. In a sign that the clock is already running out not just for an aid package but the passing of any legislation, the Senate meets for 3 days next week, 2 days the week after, and then goes into another 2-week recess. A border security package, Ukrainian aid and a 2024 budget agreement need to be passed by February the 16th, unless the Senate changes its schedule. Prime Minister of Hungary Viktor Orban said he is willing to vote in favor of the €50 billion EU financial aid package for Ukraine, but set new conditions. Orban is requiring that a vote be done every year for the next 4 years, and any single EU nation can veto future financing. Brussels has already communicated that the terms are unacceptable. What's going on in the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir? Here is the non-combat update for Russia. Complaints from wives and mothers of Russian Mobiks are increasing within Russia despite arrests, beatings and Volcan Protocol internet outages. Lydia Nekrasova released a video saying that a group of women had met with Russian officials in Novosibirsk about the treatment of Mobiks. She said that men with minor injuries, shrapnel wounds and concussions were no longer sent to an aid station or hospital and must continue to fight. Mobiks who didn't get their vacation time in 2023 were told the Russian military has a use-it-or-lose-it policy and any money owed won't be paid until the end of the war. She added that Mobiks from across Russia are being sent to the Avdiivka AO where, quote, "This is the disposal of the mobilized. The opinion is based on those terrible figures associated with our losses. We are tired of burying." Unquote. Minister of Defense of Russia Sergei Shoigu inspected the Ural Transport Engineering plant in Yekaterinburg. During the tour, he publicly criticized plant management for production delays of the new Tu-S-35 Koalitsia SV self-propelled 152mm howitzer, or SPG. Last year, the new SPG was reportedly field-tested in Ukraine and received low marks compared to the Tu-S-19 Msta. Shoigu reminded plant management they were under orders by Putin, and demanded an increase in production. Quote, "I would like to receive a report within a week on how we will reach the indicators established by the President's instructions." General of the Army Alexander Dvornikov, whom President Vladimir Putin dismissed in the summer of 2022, has been named the new head of the Voluntary Society for Assistance to the Army, Air Force and Navy, or DOSAAF. Dictator Joseph Stalin created DOSAAF in 1927 to keep the masses ready to defend their country by providing mandatory basic military training and other activities that support national defense. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the organization was renamed Rosto, Russian Defense, Sports and Technical Organization, and in 2009 the acronym DOSAAF was returned in use. General Dvornikov has been tasked with developing mandatory military training programs for Russian citizens between 14 and 35, including small arms operations, throwing hand grenades, battlefield medicine and other military tasks, returning the organization to its 1927 Stalinist roots. Russia experienced a massive internet outage, which took out almost all .ru domains nationwide for approximately 4 hours. The failure of DNSSEC, an enhancement to the domain name system, caused the issue. In the simplest terms, DNS tells the internet where to find a URL, such as malcontentment.com, while DNSSEC helps protect domains from spoofing and other attacks. The outage was not related to a cyber attack. It was likely intentional, as Russian system engineers worked to create a closed DNS system, similar to ones built by isolated states. This was a separate issue from the partial outages occurring in 3 Russian regions to support air defense. Putin's political purge continues. Political prisoner Vladimir Kara-Murza was reportedly transferred to a punishment cell at Omsk penal colony IK7. On January 26th, Kara-Murza was accused of not standing when ordered. IK7 is one of the most infamous Russian penal colonies, with prior inmates claiming that beatings, torture, electrocution, strangulation and sexual assault were common tactics by interrogators and guards. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.